Make sure your insurance doesn't come up short. Get gap cover with ALA. For more information, follow the links in the description. Hello everybody, today on the channel it's one of those cars that when it came out was really big news, but almost as soon as it was retired we all forgot about and moved on to the next big thing. But now, nearly 20 years after it was launched, I think the BMW 335i deserves a second chance. And today I'm going to be telling you why. In the wake of all that has come in the decades since its release, it is very easy to forget the significance of the E90 generation 335i. And what made it so special? Well, it's the fact that, up until this point, your BMW lineup consisted of a few 4-cylinders, then a 6-cylinder, for the meatier models perhaps an 8-cylinder, and at the top of the tree, the 7 Series and earlier the 8, you could also have a 12. But as far as petrol was concerned, they were always naturally aspirated. When this landed, things changed, and they were never the same again. For here, you now had a series range topper sat between the 330i badged car and the mighty M3, which had sat alongside its straight-six engine, not just one, but 2 turbochargers, meaning that now power and torque were healthier than ever before. And all of a sudden, this was a BMW that appealed to tuners.
Okay, it wasn't the firm's first turbo. That was the 2002 turbo of 1973, and they also dabbled briefly with it in the 1980s. But the 335i is certainly the first time in the modern era that they did it, and the first time they did it in any kind of quantity. Once it landed, it was here to stay.
And look, I get it, there are a whole bunch of reasons why people didn't and still don't like the E90 generation of car, which include the fact it doesn't look as nice as the E46, it isn't quite as well built as the E46, and it isn't quite as much of an E46 as the E46. People disliked the notion that BMW were maybe starting to cut a few corners. Things weren't quite as driver-focused as they were before. The dashboard was now flat as opposed to wonderfully curved in towards the most important seat in the car. And I get all of that. I really do. But let us now look at it in the context of not 2006 when the car launched, but 2025. And I think this is a handsome looking beast which has aged remarkably well. I mean, let's face it, hands up who thinks this is a better looking car than the current 3 Series. I know you're doing the same. As was the case with many a 3 Series before and after, you could have a selection of 4 or 6-cylinder engines in either petrol or diesel guise, but perhaps most memorably, and certainly a bit better loved, the M3 of this generation was the one and only time the 3 Series in any form got an 8-cylinder. And what an 8! A mighty, screaming engine that even today I think ranks as one of the best of all time. But what if you didn't want an M3? What if you wanted something a little less shouty, a little more daily drivable, or simply a little more affordable? Well, then the next logical step was this, the 335i, because though out of the gate it was down somewhat on power, albeit up on torque, we all knew a quick remap and in a straight line, this would keep any M3 honest. And just to confuse matters, the 335i badged car was actually available with one of 2 different engines, depending on the year that you're looking at. So the early examples, the pre-facelift built from 2007 to 2010, came with this, the N54, the twin power turbo, which actually has twin turbos. That was then replaced with the N55 engine, which made exactly the same power and torque figures, albeit with one single twin-scroll turbo. But of perhaps greater significance was the fact that at the time, this early 6-speed automatic ZF gearbox was then replaced with a 7-speed DCT for those who wanted a self-shifter. You could also get both of them with a 6-speed manual, though even when new, that was a fair rarity, and today it's very hard to find, with examples often commanding a premium that I think isn't necessarily worth paying. And just a few miles down the road, and I'm reminded of what an absolutely brilliant car the E90 is. Now, confession time, I'm not sure I've actually driven a 335i. I have driven a few different E90s and E92s, including a bunch of M3s. I even owned a supercharged one back in the day. I've also driven the 135i, which uses effectively the same setup, and fairly recently the Z4 S-Drive 35IS Roadster, which also uses this same engine, and was in fact the last car to do so. And there is just something magical about this era of BMW. This week, I've got an i4 on loan, and it's a magnificent thing, a technological tour de force with near 550 horsepower to deploy. This makes do with far less. Out of the factory gates, 306 horsepower and 300 pounds-feet. That's 400 newton meters. Though this one, like most of them, has had a remap. So it's now making over 370 horsepower and 380 pounds-feet of torque. That's 520 newton meters. The gearbox has also been remapped, presumably for response, but the entire thing is just a wonderful experience, and I can see exactly why its owner, also James, was drawn to it. And they are mostly all of the same reasons that I fell in love with BMW myself some 15 years ago. And they include the fact that not only are they clearly petrol-head orientated cars with nice meaty engines and rear-wheel drive, but they also seem to offer ludicrous value for money. He is just 21 years of age, and believe it or not, is already on his 12th car. Perhaps even more incredibly, he hasn't actually written any of those off yet. I know, mad, isn't it? As is whatever's going on in town here today. I've never ever seen this place quite so busy. The king must be around. In his time, James has had a wide variety of different cars, including a number of different Japanese ones, including a 7th generation Celica, but the one he held onto for the longest was his Mark 7.5 Fiesta ST, because that was a car that for him did absolutely everything. Had good looks, great performance, still returned decent economy, and was a fantastic all-rounder. But brilliant though that car was, and still is, as a young man and young petrolhead more importantly, there was still a lot out there that James wanted to experience, and rear-wheel drive was high on his list. So, to tick that box, whilst also still maintaining a bit of daily drivability, practicality and economy, he picked himself up an E91 generation 325D in manual. And just in case you don't speak BMW, that's this generation of car, but the estate version. And he really liked it. But with those cars not being ULEZ compliant, he figured that maybe the safest place to have his money was instead a petrol. And if you're going to buy a petrol BMW, well, it's got to be a straight 6, and it's got to be the best one you can get. Hitting the classifieds, he then couldn't believe just how good value for money these had then become. And I know I have been deliberately teasing all of you. What am I talking about here? Well, this 2009 example, so a late pre-facelift car with 127,000 miles on the clock and one owner for the last 10 years, in excellent condition, with lovely black paintwork, this gorgeous beige interior, and yes, sure, an automatic gearbox, but one that's behaving itself, set him back just £5,000. That's a lot of car for the money. But 16 years after it rolled out of the factory gates, is it still the ultimate driving machine? Well, Time to find out. Let's pop it into manual and have some fun. This is magnificent. James, young man, you've done got yourself a bargain. This is absolutely sensational. And here's the thing. He loves Japanese cars. I love Japanese cars. But for many people, the reason we fell in love with Japanese cars is because they give you so much for so little. They have not just great performance, but in many cases, great performance potential. They handle well, they're practical, they're reliable, and they should be decent to run. But the truth is that in recent years, they've become increasingly expensive, and many of the fun Japanese cars that we often think of, well, they're getting a bit older now, and that means that they're no longer the bargains they once were. I would, for example, struggle to think of anything with the mighty 1J or 2J Toyota engine in it for this kind of money that isn't basically a shed. I can't say I'm entirely keen on the map that this engine has. Towards the top end of the rev range, it does a few unusual things, but for the most part, it's utterly mighty. Has excellent response, develops power more towards the higher end of the rev range, so you do feel like there is a reward for revving it out, and it's not anywhere near as spiky as its sort of successor, the B58. And that is the engine you would have found in the likes of the M140i and M240i. And let's just talk about those for a moment, shall we? Because great though the 335i was, as soon as there was a hot 1 and 2 series, it was done. I'm sure it sold well in other parts of the world, and indeed continued to sell here, but just not in the quantity that it once did. Those M135, M235, and later of course the 140 and 240, they offered awfully good value for money, particularly when combined with increasingly aggressive finance deals. To be perfectly honest, the 3 Series just didn't stand a chance. And we need to take a moment to remember that this is in fact the last of the 3 Series coupes, because for the successor to this model, the F30 generation, the line was split, with the 3 Series remaining in production as a saloon and estate, but the coupe and convertible now being badged as a 4 Series. And that generation then brought turbo power to the M-badged cars, and as soon as that had happened, well, the 335 suddenly seemed a little bit redundant. That is, unless you were looking for a rather powerful rear-wheel drive car for not a lot of money. How's the turning circle? It's actually not that terrible. Visibility is also very, very good. This is not a pillarless coupe or anything like that, but it's much more diminutive than, say, a 6 Series. Very nice, easy, well-mannered at low speeds. Great car, this. Plenty of creature comforts too. You've got dual zone climate control. You've got your sat-nav up here with iDrive system that, yeah, sure, is showing its age, but still lets you do an awful lot. And should you want, you can upgrade too to Android Auto, Apple CarPlay, etc, etc. The paddles on the wheel I'm not fond of, because as is the case with that Z4 I recently drove, you can go up or down with either of them. Push forwards to go down a gear, pull towards to go up. It just doesn't make any sense. If I owned one of these, I would have to fix that. Or I just do what I've been doing up until now and use the lever over here for it. You've also got a sport automatic mode should you want it, and that works fairly well. The exhaust here is standard, although the valve has been wedged open. And it makes a very, very nice noise. Bit of BMW rasp, a few pops and cracks on the overrun. I like it. And it goes well, this thing. My life, does it go. if you are thinking of picking yourself up an E92 generation 335i or something a little bit like it, make sure to use CarVertical, the super-powered super search that cross-references a number of databases from around the globe to give you all the information you want to know on any potential used car purchase, including potential accident damage, mileage discrepancies, insane-o-naught birds that try and hit things, damn your eyes, involvement in fire, theft, or outstanding finance, and even stuff like import status or usage as a taxi. It takes just 60 seconds, requires only a registration or a VIN number, and for 20% off the service, don't forget to use my discount code JayEmm. But this is another example of a car where I think now today the situation is actually better than it's ever been, because now it is very, very easy to see which are the cars that have had a particularly hard life and which are the ones that have been pampered. And this is definitely in the latter category. Okay, its M Sport suspension is a little bit too firm, as is always the case with BMWs, but the steering has a beautiful weight to it. It turns in really nicely. And did I mention that engine? It's mega. Does it have the rasp, the zest for life that an M3's does? No, but if I were 21, I'd love to own a car like this. Heck, I'm 35 and I'm having the time of my life in this car. In fact, were it not that I've just bought myself a nice new daily driver, I might be thinking about one of these. What have I got? Well, you'll have to hit the subscribe button to find out. And I tell you, it's a doozy. There is a little button over here marked DTC. That's for Dynamic Traction Control, BMW's halfway house. And this must be one of the first regular cars to have gotten that system. It's very good, but in all honesty today, traction hasn't actually been that much of a problem. The car is sat on a set of Michelin PS4S, and at the rear they are marginally wider than standard. Now 265s as opposed to 255s, which does mean that the speedo now reads accurately. These 19s weren't the original fitment for this car, but look absolutely stunning on it. They're effectively a replica of those on the 1 Series M Coupe. And though I've no doubt it rides a little bit better on the original 18s, these do look good, and when you're 21, that's important. But more than that, the 18s, they're notoriously bad. They'll crack, and they're effectively made out of cheese and broken dreams. And though I know purists will always want a manual, you know what? This 6-speed ZF, it's pretty darn good, to the point that I think I might actually seek out one of these that's got it. Because you know that the premium is charged on the manual, and so you're going to get a much better car with the auto for less money. I'm sure if you were to track this thing, the brakes might be a bit of an issue, but here on the road, the pedals got decent feel, and they're very, very pleasant. But mostly, I'm just really enjoying connecting corners with this thing, and although it is, at heart, a big executive express, it's a fantastic thing to drive. If I wanted to be critical, I'd say that the feedback from the steering isn't actually that great. The weighting and the turning are, but it just doesn't respond all that well. However, it's fine. Certainly better than many a VW product, for example. And so after just a few minutes, you sit here and you look at the gorgeous leather interior with the sort of, I guess this could be wood that a while back I'd have hated and now I love, and you start to think, why on earth are these so cheap? Well, naturally, there are reasons. Economy of it is okay, but not stellar. On a run, it will achieve somewhere in the 30s. Most of the time, though, it won't. Expect an average of maybe about 25 to the gallon, which for some people will be absolutely fine, and for others, totally unacceptable. You pays your money, you takes your choice. The bigger problem, though, is this car's reputation for reliability. Though the engine itself is generally fairly durable, everything attached to it, not so much. And the N54 over years has gained a reputation for the failure of its turbo, specifically the wastegate, which is known to rattle. That's been fixed on this. The water pumps also go, but then they did on older BMWs too. Injectors, coil packs and plugs can also go, with the former being particularly problematic because you have to replace them in batches of 3. And and that gets expensive very quickly. And the big one for many people, the high-pressure fuel pump. This afflicted a number of BMWs over the years, and it's so expensive to remedy that it could, in some cases, be more than the value of the car. However, I would wager that many have already had theirs replaced with a later and better part, and others maybe just won't fail. I was saying to James earlier that maybe the next logical step from this would be something like a BMW 645 or 650, much like the one that I had. However, the V8s in those also have their fair share of problems. And they're not any quicker than these, that's for sure, but they too offer stupendous value for money. And allow me now to deliver a bitter pill that no BMW fan wants to swallow, but I am afraid is true. We love the E46, right? The E39 as well, and many of us really strongly disliked the E90 and E60 when they came out, and some of us never really got over that. But here's the honest truth of the matter. My E46, when I had it, brilliant car. But it was also relatively youthful. It was only about, 7 or 8 years old. So, of course, it was fairly good to me. Today, E46s, well, they're older because time has passed. And so, the more people I speak to, the more problems they have, and new problems start coming along too. My buddy Jack over at number 27 has been on the hunt for an E39 for ages, and I did everything in my power to try and talk him out of it, but alas, I was unsuccessful. He's now gone and bought one, and let's just say it hasn't gone so well. And that's just because these are older cars now, and if you want a good one, you're either going to have to make peace with the fact that you're going to have to pay a lot more than you remembered paying for them 10 years ago, or you're going to have to pour into it at least the value of the car, and at the end of it, that's money you're not going to see back. By simple virtue of just being a slightly more youthful car, these now have taken over the role that the E46 and E39s once did. And to me, the E90 and the E60, they're still really good cars. And this in particular, the 335i, it's such a magnificent machine because it's very understated, very elegant, a nice thing that you could park anywhere without drawing any attention whatsoever, unlike an M3. But you could get in, put your foot down and have massive fun in, then pick up the kids from school, take your nan to lunch on a Sunday, and do everything you need in a car. All the while getting to sample a delicious BMW Straight 6 with oodles of power, torque, pretty decent handling, and all of that for 5,000 quid? I'm sorry, E46, I loved you dearly. You were very good to me. But it's time, I think, to accept retirement. We're going to shuffle you off to the old folks' home and accept the fact that now anybody on the hunt for a good, nay, great BMW at sensible money, this is your starting point. Look here, and I think if it's a BMW you're after, the E90 has got what you want. So, I wish to say simply a big thank you to James for bringing his car out, and as ever, to you for watching. Don't forget to hit the like button, comment down below, subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you for the next one. Bye-bye.